Welcome to City Inside Out. Just ahead today, a 1,500-page book that's required reading, just about, for anyone wanting to build or remodel in the city of Seattle. Are we talking about back issues of Sunset Magazine? Nope, it's the Seattle Land Use Code. Mayor Nichols says it's too long and too complicated. He's called for an entire rewrite. We will talk with his lieutenant charged with that responsibility, Diane Sugamura, acting director of the Department of Design, Construction, and Land Use. And later, a local project manager and designer discusses just how hard it is to wade through Seattle's land use regulations. All that just ahead, but first a brief look at the news coming out of City Hall of late. The future of Seattle City Light Superintendent Gary Zarker, that's topic A for council members this week, who held the first of 4 high-profile public hearings into the utility chief's job performance. The mayor's office is lobbying hard for its nominee. Indeed, many testifiers spoke in support of Zarker. A smaller number came to criticize. Earlier this week, the council discussed ways to encourage off-the-record comments from those who might have valuable inside information on Zarker's abilities. Peter Steinbrook especially thinks this is important.
Many of these employees and contractors may not be willing to come forward to provide information for fear of retaliation. We recommend that the City Council establish and broadly notify citizens of a mechanism for ensuring protection from retaliation for those who wish to provide input into your reconfirmation decision but do not feel that they can do so safely under the usual rules.
Councilmember Heidi Wills is encouraging anyone who has so-called whistleblower comments about Gary Zarker's performance to meet with her privately. Well, a long-sought missing link may just have been found this week. On Friday, the mayor announced a plan to fill the 1.5-mile gap along the popular Burke-Gilman Trail. It's the area between the Ballard Bridge and the locks. Connecting the trail and that part of town has been an extremely touchy issue for years. It has pitted bicyclists against industrial businesses along the Ship Canal. Some of those businesses feel the mayor's plan doesn't sufficiently take into account their heavy use of the area. Construction on the new downtown library is coming along, but apparently not fast enough. A new audit finds the project is 4 months behind schedule. Originally set to open this October, the new facility won't be up and running until next January at the earliest. The delays have been caused both by change orders and the unexpected need to shore up walls on the Fifth Avenue side of the building. Though the delay puts pressure on keeping within the $162 million budget, library officials say the contingency fund should be able to absorb the cost of the new timeline. An interesting question this week about the monorail. Should there be a critic on the new oversight board? Peter Steinbrook says yes. Even though he was a monorail advocate, Steinbrook argues there is value in having a skeptic on the 9-person board. It's a built-in watchdog, he says. 7 of the 9 members have already been appointed, all supporters. The council has the power to nominate the final 2. Steinbrook has yet to convince his colleagues that an opponent would add value to the board makeup. Well, soon the Bill of Rights will be posted in offices throughout City Hall. This week, council members requested that all departments display copies of the Constitution's first 10 amendments. The request was part of a resolution the council passed reaffirming the civil rights and liberties of all Americans. Council members felt the strong statement was necessary to demonstrate opposition to some measures of the U.S. Patriot Act. That law was passed by Congress after the World Trade Center attacks. Councilmember Heidi Wills, who introduced the resolution, won unanimous support from her colleagues.
What we call out with this resolution is that we oppose measures that infringe upon civil rights or civil liberties or single out individuals for legal scrutiny or enforcement activity based solely on their country of origin, religion, ethnicity, or immigration status, that we support the Seattle Police Intelligence Ordinance and endorse its independent civilian oversight, and that we resolve that the City of Seattle will vigorously resist any unconstitutional acts against its citizens under the USA Patriot Act, including invasion of privacy, expanded surveillance, and denial of due process that may come from application of the U.S. Patriot Act.
One item of particular note in the resolution is the council's clear support of the city's so-called intelligence ordinance. That law bars police from opening investigative files on anyone not suspected of criminal wrongdoing. Supporting that ordinance puts the council at odds with Chief Gil Kurlikowski. He has stated strongly that the law is outdated and that in these tense times, police need more power to investigate possible criminal activity. Mayor Nichols has yet to take a position. And this also from the desk of the police chief. Last Monday, Kurlikowski said that he is considering a bold proposal to videotape all police interrogations. Criminal defense attorneys applaud the consideration, saying that creating such a record would eliminate any later question about what defendants might have said and what police might have heard. If adopted, Seattle would be one of only a handful of jurisdictions to adopt video practice. Well, pigs on hogs. That's the joke about the new plan to put Seattle motorcycle cops on Harley-Davidsons. These more stylish bikes will replace the current fleet of run-of-the-mill Kawasaki's, which have been used by the motorcycle squad for years. In this case, it turns out that more stylish is less expensive, which is the reason behind the switch. Squad morale has already improved. Have you called the city's helpline recently? Well, nearly 65,000 Seattleites did this past year, and here's why. The number helps people get city information, solve problems, and resolve complaints people might have with Seattle government. The phone rings at the Citizens Service Bureau. An audit was just performed of that office, and findings reported to the City Council.
We determined that the survey respondents were generally satisfied with the effectiveness and timeliness of the Citizens Service Bureau complaint handling practices. However, the respondents indicated that other city departments could improve their complaint handling procedures, particularly the frequency and timeliness of communications.
The Bureau's telephone helpline got a new number earlier this year, 684-CITY, to make it easier to remember. The new number was the idea of Mayor Greg Nichols. Indeed, Nichols has actually spent some time answering phones of the helpline to demonstrate his commitment to the Citizens Service Bureau. And now for our neighborhood roundup. Here's what's making news in different corners of the city. First stop, Green Lake. It's safe to swim again. Water activities have been closed since last August because of a high concentration of toxic algae. Since then, the city has been filtering more of the water flowing into the lake, which has helped reduce toxins to safe levels. And now to Belltown, where the city is considering a very new idea in drug enforcement, off-leash dogs. Police have tried for years to rid Regrade Park of rampant drug dealing, to no avail. Turning the open space into an off-leash dog area will, they hope, drive out the illegal drug activity once and for all. And now an ending of sorts to report. The General Petroleum Museum on Capitol Hill closed its doors this week. The popular neighborhood fixture opened over 20 years ago with a large collection of auto memorabilia, including old gas pumps. The museum regularly played host to wedding receptions, birthday parties, and even class reunions, including mine. Alas, the museum owners simply decided to pack it up. All the memorabilia is expected to be auctioned off later this spring. And another ending to relay, this from the Woodland Park Zoo. One of the 3 giraffes there died this week. The 13-year-old female suffered from stomach problems and kidney failures. Giraffes typically live 20 to 25 years in zoo environments. And now for our City Inside Out calendar this week. You might want to jot down some of these events which are of interest. More opportunity to have a say in the future of City Light Superintendent Gary Zarker. There are 2 final public hearings before the council takes an up or down vote on his tenure. The first is Tuesday, March the 4th. The second is Thursday, March 6th. Both of those are in council chambers. Become a park steward and help your neighborhood green space remain in good condition. A gathering of those volunteers is on Saturday, March 8th. This also from the Parks Department. March 11th, they will present plans for the renovation of Flo Ware Park in the Leschi Central neighborhood. And Go Fly a Kite Day is March 7th. Kites will be provided to all, as well as instructions on how to use them. A great event for young kids. For more information about any of these events, we direct you to our website at www.seattlechannel.org. And finally today, Name That Park. The city is looking for 3 great names for 3 great new parks in Seattle. They are located in Capitol Hill, Columbia City, and Magnolia. Parks Department officials want input before they make a decision. If you have a great name, check out their website and submit your idea. And that wraps up our news for today. Just ahead, rewriting Seattle's land use code. The editor of that project joins us, Diane Sugamura, and later a local designer and builder shares his thoughts on the subject. City Inside Out continues right after this. We now welcome Diane Sugamura. She is the acting director of the Department of Design, Construction, and Land Use, better known as DCLU. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So here it is, all 1,500 pages of it.
It seems to be growing every time somebody comments on the number of pages, but yes.
You're the one charged with the rewrite. Why now? What is the mayor so interested in rewriting this code for?
The mayor put together what was called the Economic Opportunity Task Force, and that task force prepared a report, presented it to the mayor in July, and one of the main issues, particularly related to DCLU, one of the main issues that they raised as a concern in terms of economic development was the complexity of the code. And so we committed to looking at the commercial section of the code and preparing a proposal for the mayor by the end of this year in terms of how we would rewrite that.
The code seems to me, I hear people talk about it, and they say it's a lot like the U.S. tax code. It just every year sort of another add-on happens, and not always for bad reasons. I mean, you get sort of a new issue and a new president and a new Congress wants to tinker and change and that kind of stuff. And before you know it, you've got a very complex code, and everyone kind of hates it, but it's better than all the other alternatives, as they say about democracy. Is that the case here?
I think that's very true. I guess I'd hate to compare it to the tax code in many ways, but it is a responsive code. I've heard the mayor say on a number of occasions, and he's absolutely correct, there's probably a constituent for almost everything that's in the code. There was a reason. Somebody, either neighborhood folks didn't like what was going on in their neighborhood, and so they asked to make some changes. Developers or architects would come in and say, you know, I want to do this type of project. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan, what the city is trying to achieve, but I can't do it in this situation. So then we'll change the code. It's become so specific that it makes it real difficult to apply to each unique development situation.
Hence the rewrite.
That's what we're working on.
There is a fear, however, you hear out there that rewrite and quote-unquote simplification, which is the mayor's language,
Right.
equals relaxation of environmental standards, relaxation of land use, and neighborhood issues. I mean, is it fair to say that neighborhoods and sort of small developers and just, you know, guy and girl in the street ought to be concerned when they hear rewrite and simplification?
I hope not. In terms of the environmental regulations, that's actually another section of the code. We're not working on that. Well, we're working on it because there's a state mandate to revise the environmentally critical area regulations by the end of 2004. So that's a whole nother project, but that's not relaxation. It's perhaps in some situations that perhaps even stronger. We'll still have the environmental review requirements for a project. What we're looking at is making the code so that it achieves what we're trying, what we want to achieve in the city, consistent with the comprehensive plan, consistent with neighborhood plans, those kinds of things, but a more user-friendly document. And this, I believe, should help both the neighborhood folks as well as the developers, and it would help staff in terms of understanding. There's a lot of time spent looking at the code, trying to figure out what it says, kind of going through interpretations, back and forth. This is what it says. How do I apply it in this particular situation? So we're not equating it with, just eliminating the kind of controls and restrictions.
And if I hear you right, I guess simplification for you means just that. That is, you won't change the substance of it, that everything's allowed in the code now will be allowed post-rewrite. It'll just be simpler to understand?
There may be some changes, but I don't see significant changes in what we're trying to achieve. That's been established by the comprehensive plan and neighborhood plans and things. So now it's, can we have a code that is understandable? Somebody can read it and they don't get all confused by circular language. They understand what they can do and how it applies in a particular situation. An intent statement is something that we've heard from a variety of people. the code has gotten so very specific that, and sometimes it's hard to interpret it, and there's not a lot of intent in there in terms of what it is we're trying to achieve. And so I think that's one of the first things that we want to look at is how do we clarify what it is we're trying to achieve, and then have hopefully simpler language in terms of how to get there.
Is it too hard to build projects, to develop things in Seattle?
We certainly hear that from certain people.
I mean, is that at least one of the motivators behind this?
The too hard is because almost every lot, many of the lots in the city are unique in terms of topography and things like that. And then there's a question of, well, this code, it's hard to write a code that applies to every situation in the city because of the kind of unique circumstances. And so we then end up finding ourselves amending it to allow this project because it's very consistent with what we're trying to achieve, but because the code is so specific, it doesn't allow it in this particular situation. And that's where we start building on, where you talked about the tax code, you start more and more amendments. And so we want to kind of step back and look at the overall concept and then.
Seems like every mayor, when he comes into office, talks about simplifying the land use code, making it easier. I mean, wanting to rewrite it, all the rest. Shell even kind of hired outside consultants to start a rewrite. As far as I can tell, that didn't go anywhere. Why is this effort, this generation of attempting a rewrite, going to be any more successful?
Well, one of the things that we, if I could step back a little bit in history, we totally revised the land use code between 78 and 86, and yes, it took that long, starting with single-family, multifamily, commercial, industrial. And at that time, we were changing from a 1950s code to a mid-80s code, and I think there are a lot of very good concepts in the code. For example, in commercial areas, the creation of mixed-use areas rather than totally separating residential from commercial. Areas of pedestrian-friendly character so that we get the kind of development we want in our neighborhoods. Those basic concepts are there over time, but it's 86 now, what, 16 years or something? As I said, we've revised and revised and revised and amended, and we've added a variety of, we've added layer upon layer, and we now want to go back and say, for example, in the 80s, we added a variety of regulations that were trying to address some design issues. But in 94, we added design review, which I believe has been quite successful in neighborhoods. Neighborhoods get to be involved in working with the developer on the design and how it fits in a neighborhood. Since we didn't have that in 86, do we need all the regulations that we had in 86 now that we have design review? So there are things, I believe we've advanced and learned a lot from this code and can then step back and say, how can we improve the
What
the
do
way
you
it's
do?
written.
What do you do when you rewrite to help neighbors who get alarmed and upset, justifiably, when they first learn about a big imposing project that's going to happen in their neighborhood? And often that's what it is. It's an overscale project, something that they didn't expect, and suddenly there's a board up in the street with a big picture of what it's going to look like, and they go, whoa, I didn't know this was going to be allowed, and all the rest. Is there anything in the code that can help neighborhoods understand what is and isn't allowed and what their rights are, et cetera?
Actually, the whole code is probably that, but nobody is going to read it more than likely. What we have some public information documents and things that I think will help, and we often take them out to communities. For example, you know, there isn't anything on the street that says this area is zoned for mid-rise and this area is zoned for high-rise and this has a 65-foot height limit and a 30-foot. So people who aren't in the business probably don't think about that too much until, as you said, the project comes along. What we've done in neighborhoods, and we'll do this as they request, is we'll go out, give them zoning maps so they can see how their neighborhood is zoned. We have these kind of one-page document, not one-page, one-sheet documents that say, this is what's allowed in single family. It's a simplified, this is what's allowed in multifamily, this is what's allowed in commercial. So they then get a better understanding of what can happen once they see how their neighborhood is zoned.
We just have a minute left. What are the hardest disputes to deal with? Are they neighbor to neighbor, just the simple, I want to build an addition onto my back of my house, and The guy behind the...
That's I don't know if I could say one of the most difficult, but that is clearly one. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of, because we're a built-up city, is when somebody right in the midst of a developed block will want to raise their house, maybe make it a one-story house to a three-story house. They cut in close to their neighbor. The cat comes in and the bulldozer comes in and kind of maybe damages the property next door accidentally. It's
30 seconds.
Okay, it's hard to, in an infill project. We hear complaints about that quite a bit. The other one is the one you mentioned, is a new project coming into a neighborhood when people didn't realize that, say, a 40-foot height building could go in
Was
there.
allowed, yeah. Diane Sugamura, thank you for being here.
Thank you, enjoyed it.
You're the mayor's choice to be the new head of the Department of Design, Construction, and Land Use. When we come back, a neighborhood developer rather, visits to discuss how difficult it is for him to navigate the city's land use codes. Stay with us. Our program continues in a moment. We now welcome Kurt Boozer. He is a designer and project coordinator. He's developed projects in many neighborhoods throughout Seattle. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Are you optimistic about a rewrite of the land use code?
A little.
I mean, we've done it before, as Diane Sugamura says.
Yes, she has. I mean, they have. And again, let's see what they're going to do. I mean, we've been hearing a lot of this for the last 10 years of all the things that have been occurring in Seattle in different areas, and let's see. I don't know. I mean, it's like, let's see how they're going to make this happen.
You're a developer of typically small projects. I mean, a
Yes.
small kind of neighborhood developer.
Neighborhood related, yes.
Done a bunch of projects in town. Who would you say the current land use code favors?
The big developer, majorly, the big developer. In my experience, again, the smaller developer, the smaller architect, doesn't get the opportunity to do the large-scale projects, and when they do get the opportunity to do the large-scale, or I would say the large-scale project would be probably a multifamily dwelling of some sort that maybe have some impact on the neighborhood. I think that's when it gets into a situation that the smaller developer is looking more at the neighborhood itself than as the big developer would look at it as what it's going to do to the neighborhood in the future. So,
do you feel like during the rewrite, in a process of like that, that the small developer can gain more equity in effect?
well, I think one of the things we were speaking earlier, when we spoke earlier, I want to know the rewrite is it going to, who is it going to help? The small developer or the large developer? Or is it going to just help the neighborhood person, the individual, in regards to putting a deck on their house and or wanting to buy the neighbor's their house, the house next door?
Uh-huh.
I mean, is it going to be for them as well? I mean, I'm just very curious, and the people that they're going to have help to do the new change of the land use code. I wanted to know who are they going to bring in to make that happen?
What part of the code has given you the most frustration as a builder, a designer?
Well, I would say parking and the change of use codes in regards to existing facilities.
Like, how could it be easier?
For me, to make, as an individual, my skill, I would like to see some of the existing facilities, when they go into change of use, be subject to field inspection.
Meaning, like, what's the change of use? Like, if
you're changing it from a restaurant to a grocery store or to a hair salon, or
I mean, you've done projects like that.
Yes, I have. Yes,
so you're not expanding the walls. You're not adding on. You're just literally, same envelope, just a new use,
aesthetics,
as they say.
They're basically exactly.
And what do you have to go through to change from a restaurant to a store, for instance?
Because of the different disciplines, from a store, you're going to have a lot of people coming to the store, so you're going to have adequate parking spaces. If you're looking at a restaurant, I mean, again, you can use valet for parking, but again, that's also a parking issue. If it's a community, say a library or a bookstore, most of that traffic's going to be pedestrian. That basically is fed from the neighborhood. And again, one of the things that neighborhoods which I'm involved with, or I feel that I'm involved with, is that I like to see neighborhoods be self-contained. Basically, when we do these designs or bring in these facilities or bringing in these new restaurants, stores or whatever, we can, knowing the neighborhood, we have the opportunity of knowing where people could park, how foot traffic comes into our areas. I feel that the neighborhood has a stronger bearing on it than sometimes the city can.
And so, if I understand you right, then you change the use, and then the city will say under this land use code, you got to provide X number of parking stalls, and you only have half that number, let's say.
Exactly.
And your point is what? But the neighborhood's got stalls down the street, or we can rent them across the block.
Exactly.
And the code doesn't allow that kind of flexibility.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying in some of the projects that I've been involved with.
I mean, parking's been one of the biggies.
Major, because of some of the development that are happening in some of the small areas. I mean, Fremont's going great guns, but everyone's saying, oh, there's no place to park in Fremont. I mean, Jesus, there's tons of parking. I mean, I think it's getting a lot easier now because we've been putting brochures out in regards to areas that you can park and or park and walk. And, I mean, and that's one of the neighborhoods that I've been spending a lot of time in as well. It's a pedestrian area. We want to keep it that way. Well, I shouldn't say we don't want to keep it that way, but we want to make it friendly, pedestrian friendly.
Another thing we have talked about in the past, you and I, is a tour boat that you want to put into Fremont. Having trouble, again, with the land use code. How come?
Well, it's pretty much, it's a little bit of the land use code, and it's also some of the neighborhood involvement of owners that have properties adjacent to what we're doing, and they feel that it's a situation that is going to disrupt their involvement or disrupt their property or their surroundings. I mean, we're talking about a tour boat that's being used maybe twice out of the week, and everyone in Seattle, when they come to Fremont, it's a pedestrian feel. We're on the water. It's an existing marina. And
you just want to dock it there a couple times a week.
Put people on, get them off, leave.
And what's the problem with the city?
The city. It's not a major problem with the city. I think they're trying to basically trying to help this person that's saying, I should say the other owner, to basically give him a clear idea that we are trying to make something that's acceptable. And I mean, we don't really have to go through a lot of exercises, but in a sense, the city is saying, well, you got to give this person all this information in regards to this is why you're doing it. I mean, it's already written in the code saying if it's a marina use, I mean, therefore it's water related and it's pedestrian related.
So here's a situation where you feel like the code's on your side, but you're not getting the city to understand that.
Well, the city not relating to we don't want to answer the neighbor's information. We want the city to say, well, this is the code, this entity's making this work per the code. We don't really see a big thing with it.
Yeah.
Don't put it back in our lap so we can make a change or make the decisions and then get it back into the city, and the city's going to go, well, this is a change, and get it back to the other owner. And then, I mean, we have all this dialogue when it's a very simple situation. So,
with that, we have to close.
Oh, well, okay.
Goes fast. Thank you so much for being here, Kurt Boozer. You are a project coordinator and a designer.
Yes.
Thanks for coming in. And we thank you all for watching. Join us next week for another edition of City Inside Out. Until then, on behalf of our talented studio crew here, I'm C.R. Douglas. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.